Man, you were hard on yourself. It took till the third contract before you were like, okay,
Yeah,
I've made it here.
For guys who made it to the NFL, you had to have something, right? But then to stay in the NFL and to survive and to actually thrive in the NFL, you had to be different. And some people will call it crazy a little bit. I definitely feel like I had that. I still have that to some degree.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sidekicks Conversations. I'm Mike Sievert. Today, I am sitting down with a football legend turned tech investor and CEO, Super Bowl champion, Doug Baldwin. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for being here. Well, I know you guys already know this, but between 2011 and 2018, Doug Baldwin was a celebrated wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. And since 2019, he's been the CEO of Vault89 Ventures. That's a venture capital firm whose mission is to invest in ideas that break down barriers that prevent so many from being successful. And more recently, he's also taken on the title of CEO at Ventric, a venture that I hope we learn more about today. So Doug, welcome to our headquarters and to Sidekicks Pug. Let me start off. I know you're from Florida.
Yep.
And I've heard that your dad was a policeman and your mom an activist. So can you tell us about your upbringing in Florida and also maybe how that might have shaped you as an adult?
Yes, my father was a police officer in Pensacola, Florida for 35 plus years. As you can imagine, a black man in the South, a police officer, a lot of stories there. My mother, I don't know if I would call her an activist. I don't know if she'd call herself an activist, but she was an activist. She was very active in all of the things in our community, especially when it came to race relations. Our specific area was, don't get me wrong, I love it for what it is and for what it was. A lot of lessons learned in my experience back home in Florida, but it also wasn't the most progressive area in our country. And so there was a lot of folks who believed certain things that my family did not believe in. The Ku Klux Klan had a prominent presence there. And
what kinds of things was your mom involved in?
She was worked in the administrative part of the Salvation Army, but the back end of that was a community center. And she was very active in that realm. But also was just available to the community. So kids who were struggling with whatever, right? Parents struggling with addiction, parents being incarcerated. She spent a lot of time taking care of a lot of those kids. And I saw my mom do that. And I saw the empathy and the sympathy and the compassion that she had for these families and for these young people. And that couldn't help but rub off on me. And so, now as a 34, 35 years old, male trying to figure out my way and how I'm impacting the community that I'm a part of, a lot of that influences the way that I show up in my community.
Do you think that upbringing informed how you tackled your career early on, at the college level, pursuing your football career in the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. You have childhood experiences, right? You have environmental experiences, historical context that plays a role in why I was the way that I was. Truth be told, I actually don't really enjoy football. I didn't really enjoy football at that time. I didn't, who wants to get hit, right? And I was in Florida in the humidity and the 100-degree heat all the time. Like, it's hot, right? Like, that wasn't necessarily fun. But football was a vehicle for me to express who I was at that time. It was also a vehicle for me, in some ways, to kind of escape, right? It was an escape for me. And I had blessed with the physical ability and the physical talent, and I really craved that way of receiving affirmation and affirming who I was and my value in the world. And I pursued that to the utmost degree because that was how I felt safe.
When did you know that this hard work was going to really amount to something?
Probably my third contract. It's when I signed my third contract in 2016, I believe it was.
Man, you were hard on yourself. It took till the third contract before you were like, okay,
Yeah,
I've made it here.
For guys who made it to the NFL, you had to have something, right? But then to stay in the NFL and to survive and to actually thrive in the NFL, you had to be different. And some people will call it crazy a little bit. I definitely feel like I had that. I still have that to some degree.
I want to get to some of the incredible heights that you achieved. along the way. But first, while we're on this topic, can you talk about some of the setbacks? Because if you're coming from that kind of a place, how did you deal with, I mean, at your level, there are always setbacks.
Yep.
You know, there are always regrets, there are mistakes, there are losses, there are close calls. How did you deal with that? How did you pick yourself back up?
Yeah, to be honest, not very well at the beginning, right? Because again, if you're coming from that place, when you don't have that, when you feel like that's slipping away, you get really scared. And in my case, I got angry. And some of you have heard the phrase angry Doug Baldwin, right? It doesn't come from necessarily a place of being angry at somebody else. It's angry at the fact that we're not winning. And if we're not winning, then I don't feel safe. And so I need that. And you're not gonna stop me from getting that, right? So that's where that competitive spirit came out of.
And you're helping to share some of this with younger athletes, right? I mean, isn't it interesting how in professional sports in particular, young athletes get thrust onto this world stage, you know, at a pretty young age when they're still forming their worldviews and their communication skills and some of the thought processes. So here you are in your mid-30s, parent of 3, looking back at the football portion of your career. How do you help the young athletes coming up? Because I know you spend some of your time on that.
Yeah, I spoke to the rookies, the Seahawks rookies not too long ago. And my message to them was, you know, first and foremost, you got to be honest with yourself, right? Understand why you are here. But to understand that, you got to ask yourself, why are you here, right? And not just a surface level answer that you give the media when they ask you, like, why are you here? There's true underlying reasons of why each athlete has made it to the NFL.
And each one's different from the next?
Each one is different from the next. But in order to survive and thrive in the NFL, you got to understand that, right? And maybe it's not so much coming from a healthy place, and that's okay. We're all human. We all show up in our various environments, bringing our full selves to the table, right? It's okay. But I told them this, at some point, in order for you to be a healthy, human, productive citizen of society, you're gonna have to deal with that. And so while you're in the NFL, utilize that to the best of your ability because it's gonna give you an advantage, right? It's already given you an advantage to be here. So use that to your advantage, but then when you're done with this, make sure you go back and you unpack that. I know from personal experience, when I left the game, it was 8 months of pure hell.
In what way? Losing a sense of identity or?
Yeah, it was just deep depression of not understanding, like, what is this, right? Like, I leave the game, and let's be honest, there's nothing that can compare to 80,000 people screaming your name after you score a touchdown. There's nothing that compares to that high, right? And it's a high.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have that anymore, you're looking for that, you're searching for that, and you can search for that in the wrong places. And I did for a long time. Again,
it's a great way of putting it.
Great therapy. My wife is incredible, great support system around me. And I found some more passions that kind of bring that competitive spirit out of me. And so I have another outlet to push that energy towards.
Looking back at your football career, you know, are there moments that stand out? And there could be moments like that, you know, with 80,000 people shouting your name.
Probably the moment that stands out the most to all of us, and I know Pete's gonna be so mad at me for bringing this up, we didn't hand the ball off.
It doesn't take very long talking to you to understand that you have a lot of insights into just people and what drives us. That must come from your experience growing up. It must come from your experience operating as a world-famous athlete. How have you taken those insights into people and into yourself and transitioned them into being an impact investor and being a CEO? Like, what's that been like over these last few years?
Challenging, very challenging. You know, traditional education was kind of like not my route of how I learned best, right? I got to get my hands dirty. I got to fail, take those lessons and apply it again, fail again, continue. That's how I learned, right? And so impact investing, I really started more of a traditional investor. You know, you look at the return, right? Is this a good opportunity or is it not? And the more and more I got into that, the more and more it didn't feed my soul, you know? And I know, so don't get me wrong here, right? I understand we all have our different roles in society. But for me specifically, I felt like there were folks who looked like me who didn't have access and an opportunity in this space, in this realm. And nobody was really looking out for them. Nobody was looking to them and saying, hey, come over here, let me show you this. And so the approach that I take is vastly different than some of the folks in my office would like me to admit, right? There's some folks on my team that just like, they're capitalists and they care about the return of investment financially. And I'm like, no, I don't care about the return of investment financially, right? It's the impact that we're making. And that return of investment may happen several generations down the line that we may not benefit from, but our families, our culture, our society will benefit from that. You know, when I look at the investment piece of this, I also look at it from a competitive lens. I want to be the best at what I do. And what I do is take a team, a problem, build a team around it, build a culture around it, and then go solve that problem. And not necessarily for a financial return, but for the empathetic impact that it makes, right? And I feel like if I can do that, then I can leave it up to other folks who have a greater experience and depth of the business side of things to then go and make the impact around that then helps that scale, right?
I love it.
But I want to get it started. And how do I make sure that I'm honoring my daughters, right? When they're younger, that they're going to look back and say, I'm proud of my father for making those decisions.
That's an inspiration. Tell us, how do you take that energy, and it's not just your money, but it's your time at Ventric, where you're serving as CEO. That's about health outcomes. Tell us about what that business is all about.
It's a physical therapy app that's basically trying to get folks to actually do their home exercise program, right? So long story short, it's really trying to understand the behavior of the human being of why they don't do their home exercise program, right? And we've gotten really close. We've gotten very specific in the experience of how patients go through their program. The industry standards around 20 to 25% of people actually completing their home exercise program. We're at 65% and still growing. But one of the things that I know really well is that if you go out and you accomplish something physically, even if it's something small, you feel really good about yourself, right?
You want to keep going.
Right, there's a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Now, if I can take that and inject it into the recovery journey for some of these folks, and for a lot of these folks they're not living healthy lifestyles. I just be honest about it, right? For some folks, right, they have a freak accident, they're injured, and they have to go through a recovery. But for some of these folks that are experiencing chronic pain, they just don't have the tools or the information that I was given as a professional athlete of how to incorporate the knowledge of actually healing yourself and then staying healthy. This is a pathway to do that.
You keep talking about coming at it from the point of view of empathy, empathetic investing and understanding even people's point of view when it comes to complying with their home therapy regimens and their workouts. Why is that the theme? Is that a core tenet for Vault89 investing, is to open doors for people and show empathy for where they're coming from?
Yeah, empathetic solutions that create access, opportunity, and a sense of belonging. That's part of our mission, what we're trying to do. And so, we try to lead our company with that mindset. Yes, we can invest in really cool things and make some money, but we can also do it in a way that impacts our society for good. That doesn't mean we always get it right. I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but if we're looking through that lens, then we're giving ourselves a chance to make positive impact.
Well, Doug, I hope you open many more doors for many more people for years to come. You're a true inspiration and a Seattle hero. And I hope to see you in my hometown of Canton, Ohio sometime.
Amen.
Doug Baldwin, everybody. Thanks for being here at Sidekicks.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everybody for tuning in to another Sidekicks conversation. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.